We have big pieces shifting every day. So how has the CIA shifted its focus under the second Trump administration? Todd Bensman is a senior fellow for the Center for Immigration Studies, and he recently told Steve Bannon that the agency has realigned its focus from Ukraine to the Mexican cartels. Watch.
Where they're going to really be enhancing and increasing their ability to infiltrate the cartels, to provide intelligence against the cartels in a more dedicated, committed fashion, a wider, broader way to do counter narcotics.
So we need more information on that. So Todd is joining us now to break it all down. So what's going on right now with the CIA at the southern border?
Right. The CIA is being repositioned right now as we speak from European and Middle East theaters to the theater of Mexico for counter-narcotics operations. And I think that it's important to understand the broader context of this, which is that Donald Trump campaigned, and since he's been elected, has said many, many times that we are going to stop the fentanyl smuggling from the cartels into the United States that's killing all our people. Hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of overdoses inside the United States from that. The administration seems to be setting the table right now for something. Not sure what it's going to be just yet, but in addition to the CIA repositioning, the administration is also doing a tremendous number of additional spy flights over Mexican waters and near Mexican territory and sometimes even in Mexican airspace. And on top of that, the Green Berets have been sent down there to train Mexican naval infantry forces in non-conventional warfare, which is something new and different as well. So there seems to be naval assets that are being moved up the Gulf of America, and something's going on. 10,000 Mexican troops now positioned up there. We'll see.
So this is, this is an enormous difference from what we've seen over the last, the 4 years of Joe Biden. I mean, it's sudden, it's remarkable. What do you think happens next, though? Because the cartels are going to respond, no? I mean, this should usher in a new era where really you have a kind of narco state for a while now in Mexico, patchwork quilt of, normalized corruption. And is this the beginning of actually unraveling all of that?
Well, this is pure speculation, but I don't mind if I do. Remember, the administration is saying things that the terminology, the verbiage that they're using are things like, we are going to completely wipe out the cartels, things like that. Now, that could just be hyperbole, but I do think that a probable kind of operation that they're setting the table up for now is to have Mexico throw out its hugs, not bullets. I'm not kidding. Hugs, not bullets policy toward the cartels and trade it in for a bullets, not hugs policy, or else they'll be looking at 25% trade tariffs, which Donald Trump has already put in place and has his finger hovering over that button if he doesn't get some scalps pretty soon. That's what I think is going to happen. I think the Mexicans are going to use American intel, American training, maybe American weapons to do things against the fentanyl labs and the mobile fentanyl labs, the smuggling lanes, to try to convince those cartels to give up the fentanyl part of it, at least. So we'll see what happens. We've been involved in things like this with Mexico in the past. It hasn't worked out all that great. From 2006 to 2012, the Calderon government, with us behind them like this, went full military kinetic on the cartels, and it didn't work out. But we also did it with FARC down in Colombia, and that one did work out. So we'll see.
So you're saying we should fire up the Sicario movies to prepare for action as in the audience. We'll see what happens. I mean, I don't see I don't see any way to succeed without going all the way, and that goes to the heart of really the problem of the regime in Mexico. So that will be very interesting. But let's put that aside for a minute and zoom out a little bit, just in general. When you look, most people looking at the border now, right? It seems like, well, everything's fine. I mean, right? It's a trickle. How do you sort of assess the big picture right now when it comes to the border?
Well, the greatest mass migration crisis event in American history, and I think maybe a world history, is over. It was over 1 hour after inauguration. There are somewhere around the 200, 250, under 300 illegal crossings a day now, which we haven't seen since the early 60s. That's how low the numbers are, and I would call that operational control. And that's because the very first thing the administration did was he ended catch and release. Nobody's getting released into the interior, as opposed to everyone being released who got there under the Biden administration. Of course, there were millions that came. So all anybody ever had to do was just stop releasing them and expel them instead. That's what Trump did, and it ended it immediately. Did not need a big Lankford bill, a big Senate bill like Harris kept talking about all through the campaign. Didn't need to fix root causes in Central American countries. Today, there's reporting out that thousands of Venezuelans and others are now flowing backwards through the Darien Gap the way they came in. Thousands taking speedboats off the coast of Panama back to Colombia, returning home. Thousands. So that tells you that this thing is probably going to stick.
Well, I want to get your take on border czar Tom Homan, because we love watching him, right? All the headlines that he makes, all the sound bites that he has on the news shows. But it's not just that, right? He's actually getting the job done. But this is your wheelhouse. So I want to know what you think of the job that Tom Homan has done and kind of the things that you've noticed that other people might not have recognized yet.
Yeah. Well, first of all, colorful figure. You got to appreciate that. Tom Homan talks, and he talks the talk, but he is walking the walk. He wants those numbers up. He's pushing nonstop to get the deportation numbers from the interior up. And they are up greater than any rate that Joe Biden ever had, because Biden all but ended interior deportations. And by the way, as an aside, don't believe the press coverage about, Homan's deportations are lower than Biden's, because Biden people are counting some of the Title 42 pandemic era border expulsions that were going on right at the immediate border, not the interior, which is what Homan's doing. So I think that, he wants higher numbers because, and I'm saying, manage your expectations down a little bit, because the Biden administration dismantled the detention centers. So they didn't have the bed space necessary to put people while we wait for the planes, or to, get a paddy wagon to drive them over the border, that sort of thing. And those beds are filling up now. Homan inherited 40,000 beds, and he needed 100,000. So they need $175 billion they're asking for in budget to build the infrastructure out to be able to actually bring the numbers up really high for the deportation. So just be patient a little bit.
Todd, our friend Brianna Morello, independent journalist, posted on X that the TSA under Joe Biden focused on speeding up checkpoints to process non-U.S. citizens at certain airports who do not have acceptable identification. So what Brianna is saying is that she got this information from a FOIA request, by the way, that documents that suddenly became acceptable forms of identification included warrant of arrest of alien, warrant of removal or deportation, and a notice to appear. So how was the previous administration able to repurpose those documents as IDs? And I hope to God this isn't going to continue.
No, that's so all that that crap's over. None of that stuff is happening anymore. They ended that day one, all of it done. What was going on there is the chief concern of Mayorkas and Biden, the only concern was a political one, which was they didn't want congestion that down on the border, people that were kind of stuck and waiting. So many were coming across. They didn't want big, large conglomerations and group congregations of people that Fox News could fly their drone over and embarrass them with. So they ordered TSA to just take whatever we give you and let them on the plane. It was a federal decision. Just let them on the plane so that we can move them out. We just got to move them out off the riverbanks so that nobody can fly over it with a news drone and say, wow, look how many there are. That's all that was. So that's over. None of that kind of thing is happening. The CBP-1, the parole programs where they were flying in from foreign airports, that all ended inauguration hour 12 plus 1 minute, literally 60 seconds. That was the first thing they did, was they killed those programs. And everybody, you saw the tears and crying down there, and now they're heading on speedboats out of Panama going back home to supposedly nations that they were fleeing that were so bad they had to declare political asylum and swear that they needed U.S. sanctuary from the persecution that they were getting in all these other countries they were living in, that they're going back to right now, which was all a lie, a total fraud.
Well, Todd Bensman, great stuff as always. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And Matthew, when you look at it, the border obviously was one of the biggest, if not the absolute top of what Trump and his administration said they were going to do on day one. And like Todd's saying, exactly as soon as they got in there, things started happening immediately, and to the American people's pleasure, really. Like we finally get to see all of this stuff in action.
Yeah, so the first thing to notice about the border, which everyone is saying already, is that it shows you how purposeful this was. Very easy. Boom. Done. Exactly. Todd's saying it. You're saying it. We're all seeing it, right? So we know that this was purposeful. This was a policy to let in millions of people. There's no doubt about it. But the deeper truth here is that where there's a will, there's a way. And it's over with now. I mean, you hear what he's saying. It's done. So now the greater question is, what are we going to do about Mexico itself? And its dilapidated state. I mean, it is a narco state still. What are we going to see? What are we going to see happen? And then how are we going to ramp up deportation, right? That's the next level.
Yeah, the deportations. Tom Homan is going out there and, like Todd's saying, yes, everything. He wants to get those numbers up. He wants to work that. I will be curious, though, because I do feel like we have a window of time right now where the American people are still for it because they haven't had all of the news media outlets that are trying to push the sob stories that we've seen, right? AOC is no longer crying down there on the border. Maybe we'll see that in the next month or two. But we do have this short period of time right now where you can really enact the deportations. Yeah,
right now, the sob stories aren't working. And maybe they haven't cranked it up all the way. There's been some of that in the mainstream media for sure. But it's not working. And right now, I think the American people want this. Look, I've talked to many liberals about this, like people who are complete lefties or just moderate Democrats. And a lot of them will admit, when I say to them, because I pose the hypothetical, you could have won the presidency easy. You could have beat Donald Trump easy. All you had to do was run someone who said, the border's out of control and I'm a Democrat, I'm going to do something about it. Don't you think? Right? I pose that to them, and they're all, almost to a person, they go, yeah, that's kind of true. Like, why? You still don't have anyone who's speaking sensibly about the border. Right? So right now, I think there's a real chance for Donald Trump to actually mass deport.
And his approval numbers are actually going up right now, which is interesting to see that all of these things are happening and people are just liking him more as we go.